It is Saturday, April 19th, and huge news coming from HHS, which is freaking the biopharma medical industry out. RFK Jr. basically going to war on behalf of America's youth. Wait till you see this. Also, accountability is coming. The thousands of NGOs that have been caught defrauding the United States, the NGOs that Doge and Elon have outed, are now under the microscope. Prosecutions are coming. Billionaire Peter Thiel, longtime friend of Elon Musk, very smart guy who's well connected, gives us a hint at what's coming down the pike, how all this fraud we've seen Doge discover will be prosecuted, how Pam Bondi will be handling this. Very interesting idea he has. One of them that comes to mind is Stacey Abrams' NGO, who Biden gave $2 billion of our tax dollars to. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be her right now, and more stories as well from around the country. But before we get started, thank you for liking and sharing these videos. It really helps out the channel. And consider subscribing so you don't miss these regular updates. So the Maha movement is real. It's underway, and we've been hearing for weeks that there's a lot happening at HHS, Health and Human Services, the single largest department in the federal government, a department whose budget dwarfs the Defense Department. Believe that, for far too long, that agency has been used not to make Americans healthy, but to cater to the biopharma and food industrial complex, to the lobbyists from these giant corporations. RFK Jr. speaking publicly for the first time on what he's been up to, what he's been working on for the last 2 months. First, dropping a hint about this early in the week at Trump's cabinet meeting, briefly mentioning this huge study he's commissioning on the root causes of autism, and that he says we should have a definitive answer about this. What's really behind the dramatic spike in cases? He says we should know that by September. Well, he then followed up yesterday on Fox, laying out the data, the scientific data on why this study is so important, and revealing it's not just a single study. This is going to be like the Manhattan Project of health studies. Watch him yesterday here in this interview, dismantling the media narrative about this, shattering the core excuse they give us about this epidemic not being real, that it's just caused to a change in how we count the cases, how we measure new cases nowadays versus how we used to do it 40 years ago. Watch him shatter this. Then we'll play what he's been doing about it. What he just said, freaking establishment Washington out. Roll the tape.
The media has bought into this industry canard, this mythology, that we're just seeing more autism because we're noticing it more, we're better at recognizing it, or there's been changing diagnostic criteria. There is study after study in the scientific literature going back decades that says that that's not true. In fact, California legislature in 2013 asked the Mind Institute at UC Davis to look exactly at that topic. They said, is it real, or are we just noticing it more? And the Mind Institute came back and said, absolutely, this is a real epidemic. This is something we've never seen before. And anybody with common sense, Sean, would notice that, because the autism, this epidemic, is only happening in our children. It's not happening in people our age. And if it was better recognition, you'd see it in 70-year-old men. And I'll say this, I want to be very careful when I say it, because I've never seen a person with full-blown autism. I've seen many people with Asperger's and, on the spectrum who are my age. I've never seen anybody with full-blown autism. That means nonverbal, non-toilet trained, etc. You don't see these people walking around a mall, because they don't exist in our age.
That is our Secretary of Health and Human Services, the top health official in this country, clearly not buying that excuse anymore. Then he goes into specifics, details on what this Manhattan Project style study will do, saying this is our one chance to not leave any stone unturned, saying President Trump has ordered him to get the answer, and that's exactly what he's doing, saying he's approaching it agnostically. We are looking at everything. We're going to be very transparent in how we design the studies, farming them out to 15 premier research groups across the country. We're going to be transparent about our protocols, about the data sets, and then every study will have to be replicated. We're going to be looking at mold, at the age of the parents, at food and food additives. We'll look at pesticides, toxic exposures, at medicines, yes, at jabs. We're going to be looking at everything. And then when asked how long this is going to take, he again reiterated we should have preliminary answers in 6 months by September and definitive answers 1 year after that, saying nothing, absolutely nothing is off limits. Watch.
I mean, we are getting data. They are investigating it. Where do you think we're going to end up? What is your best guess, hypothesis, theory at this point?
Well, President Trump asked me to find out what's causing it. And I'm approaching that agnostically. We are looking at everything we're going to do. We're going to be very transparent in how we design the studies. We're going to farm the studies out to 15 premier research groups from all over the country. And we're going to be transparent about our protocols, about the data sets, and then every study will have to be replicated. We're going to look at mold. We're going to look at the age of parents. We're going to look at food and food additives. We're going to look at pesticides and toxic exposures. We're going to look at medicines. We're going to look at vaccines. We're going to look at everything.
Well, that's the quintessential definition of science, and you're going to get to the bottom of it. I only have about 20 seconds. How long do you think it'll take?
I think we'll have some preliminary answers in 6 months. But it'll take us probably a year from then before we can have definitive answers, because a lot of these studies will not go out until the end of the summer.
This only being possible because of Donald Trump, because Trump is president. This really is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to get real transparency. And I don't know about you, but it sure feels refreshing. I don't know the answer, but I do know that for my entire lifetime, it's felt like mainstream narratives were set in stone. To rise up, you couldn't challenge the status quo. Even asking questions would end your scientific career. This distorted, stagnant groupthink mindset has infected academia and STEM fields. It's refreshing, hugely refreshing to see that changing. And yet the people who benefit from the status quo, the people who built their careers on it, the swamp, are oh so nervous. Watch Peter Hotez. Remember this guy, the man who refused to debate RFK Jr. on Joe Rogan last year? Watch him responding to this.
Now, I will say in regard to Dr. Marx's letter, that sounds about right, that Mr. Kennedy seems to have this fixed belief that vaccines do bad things to kids, and he's absolutely wrong. I mean, we have this extraordinary vaccine ecosystem that's led to the elimination of multiple childhood infections, including kid meningitis and measles and many others. And now I'm really concerned that he is so fixed on these false links between vaccines and autism and other things that this is going to jeopardize our entire vaccine ecosystem. That's point one. Point two, I don't know what this means now when there's efforts to introduce new vaccines. The technology now is really advancing rapidly. We have the opportunity to build next generation vaccines for emerging diseases. I'm very concerned about H5N1, and we need better vaccines for H5N1. We may have another coronavirus illness coming online. Remember, we've had SARS in 2002, which is a coronavirus, MERS in 2012, and of course COVID-19 in 2019. And I'm worried that we could have another one as well. And we always need, the vaccine producers are always refining and improving vaccines. And I'm worried that all innovation is going to stop.
Let me know in the comments if you think this is a good idea, if you support RFK doing this giant study, getting to the bottom of the rise in autism. I do. Yes, I certainly do. In another story, billionaire Peter Thiel, longtime friend of Elon Musk, says he knows the strategy that may be used to prosecute the thousands of NGOs and the people who are running these NGOs. Peter Thiel's very smart guy, a well-connected guy. He clearly has insight into how this may go down. And his idea, to me, sounds like it makes sense, sounds like it'll work. It's a good idea. What he's talking about here is all the fraud that Elon and Doge have found so far, how how the DOJ will hold these fraudsters accountable. So far, we've seen no prosecutions, not even any charges or hints of charges forthcoming. Well, according to Peter Thiel, prosecutions are coming, and there could be thousands of them. Watch.
I've been a little bit shocked. Like, I knew there was waste, but there seems like a lot of scams they're finding. I guess like a lot more scams, I guess, than I
think there
knew.
were scams. I think the nonprofit stuff is
the NGO stuff's out of control.
Is really out of control. It's sort of like, I don't know. It's sort of like virtue signaling is a sign that you're doing something evil.
Yeah.
And so much of this left-wing philanthropy nonprofit world, I think was, it was just a cover for, borderline criminal activity.
It's how you shield yourself. You have to put a virtue signal up while you're stealing money from everyone. Yeah.
There's one of the, and there's all the stuff you'd have to really go into the weeds of how this stuff works. But the way it was explained to me, there's sort of a level 5 description, which is a line item, description of what the actual dollars are going to. And then there are ways these things get summarized. And the way they got summarized for, a lot of the political appointees was a level 4 description, where you summarize a bunch of level 5 descriptions as a, as an alternate, in a level 4 way. And then obviously there are ways, you can have, I don't know, you can have 20 groups that are, providing food to Africa, different African countries, and you can summarize that as food to Africa. That's maybe an accurate description. And then if they're actually all working on the Biden re-election, that's an inaccurate description. At some point, the descriptions are so inaccurate that the people in the government could be prosecuted for fraud.
Yeah.
And one of the people who looked at this a lot thinks you could just prosecute these people for fraud. This is something like this is what Oliver North was prosecuted for in the Iran-Contra scandal in the 80s, was he mischaracterized the money and he mislabeled it. And it was like, he was accused of defrauding the government. And I think you could prosecute thousands of these people criminally for the thing that they wanted to prosecute Oliver North for in the 80s.
The vast majority of them are former Biden government officials who retired to start these NGOs and received billions in our tax dollars. Even people, just members of the Democrat class, people like Stacey Abrams, the woman who lost her Georgia governor race, a failed politician starting an NGO to fight climate change, and the Biden administration awarding her with $2 billion of our money, our tax dollars. $2 billion went to Stacey Abrams. It's insane. Well, if it turns out that she spent any of that $2 billion on things that were different from what she wrote in her formal request, she could be indicted for fraud, defrauding the United States, and good riddance. In another story, the U.S. Supreme Court this morning, Saturday morning, blocked, for now, the deportations of any Venezuelans held in northern Texas under the Alien Enemies Act law. The court, in a 9-0 decision, directed the Trump administration not to remove any Venezuelan held in the Blue Bonnet Detention Center until further order of this court. Now, why this is important is because the final ruling in this case will determine how Trump can use this law nationally, across the board. This case is specific to one detention center in Texas, but will have major implications across the board. This coming after an entire week of nonstop hysteria from Dems and the media around Trump deporting that alleged MS-13 gang member, Abrigo Garcia, sent this El Salvadorian citizen back to El Salvador. Why this is so controversial, I have no idea. He was here illegally. He had 2 deportation orders against him. He was associated with MS-13 allegedly. What am I missing? Trump this morning releasing a photo of Abrigo Garcia's hand tattoos to Truth Social, something that has the media losing their minds over. Look at this. Trump saying, this is the hand of the man that the Democrats feel should be brought back to the United States because he is such a fine and innocent person. They said he's not a member of MS-13, even though he's got MS-13 tattooed on his knuckles. And 2 highly respected courts found that he was a member of MS-13, beat up his wife, etc. I was elected to take bad people out of the country, among other things. I must be allowed to do my job, make America great again. Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen traveling to El Salvador Thursday on your dime, on the taxpayers' dime, to meet with this guy, taking him out for drinks, for margaritas. Yes, those are margaritas on the table. This photo going mega viral, to which the senator finally now going on defense, suggesting he was set up, admitting, yes, we did have margaritas on the table, but swearing neither him or this MS-13 gang member drank from them.
About what I would call Margarita-gate. I don't know if you guys have been following this, but President Bukele, after I met with Kilmar, did this tweet showing us at a table with these two glasses. So here's what happened. When I first sat down with Kilmar, we just had glasses of water on the table. I think maybe some coffee. And as we were talking, one of the government people came over and deposited two other glasses on the table with ice, and I don't know if it was salt or sugar around the top, but they look like margaritas. And if you look at the one they put in front of Kilmar, it actually had a little less liquid than the one in front of me, to try to make it look, I assume, like he drank out of it. Let me just be very clear. Neither of us touched the drinks that were in front of us. And if you want to play a little Sherlock Holmes, I'll tell you how you can know that. So if you look at the video or the picture I sent out from the beginning of our meeting, you'll see there are no glasses on the table. So you'll see in later videos they are on the table. But they made a little mistake. First, some people are very careful, right? If you sip out of one of those glasses, some of whatever it was, salt or sugar, would disappear. You would see a gap. There's no gap.
All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.